Hello, everybody. Thought I would do a shorter version of a You Can't Do That on Salesforce video. If you weren't on the stream yesterday, you should be on the stream. But if you weren't on the stream yesterday, we're still building Uno. It's been 5 episodes into Uno, and things are starting to work, which is cool. We're teaching, or I should say, setting up Salesforce to let players take turns. And playing a turn means looking at your hand, picking a card, matching it to the card that's on the top of the deck. You guys know the deal with Uno. So, where we left it yesterday was plans for the next episode, which included building some more of the Lightning Web components and flows and taking advantage of some of the reactive functionality in both of those, really to get LWCs talking to each other through the flow. Well, I got itchy last night and went ahead and built some of that. I want to show it off because I think there's some cool concepts. I think this is really going to evolve Flow plus LWC development quite a lot. And, let's take a look. So without giving you the entire anthology of Uno in Salesforce, suffice to say we have some flows and some data model and, some data that runs the game. And we use flows as exclusively as possible, infused with a little bit of Apex Invocable, but mostly flow to start a game, to start a turn, which means, taking a card off the deck basically and putting it in someone's hand, and then playing a turn. That's what we worked on the other day. So playing a turn is you've already got a hand, or you're holding a hand of cards. You've already drawn a card, and now you're deciding what are you going to play next. So that implies some UI to give to the user so they can see what they've got in their hand, what's on the top of the deck, and just make it start looking a little nicer and a little bit more than a typical screen flow. So enter LWCs. Makes sense, right? They're good at rendering stuff and making UI and whatnot. So here's our flow that plays a turn, and it's a screen flow. Usual suspects: getting some data at the start, running some tests to make decisions. Like, for example, when we play a turn, we don't want to let you play a turn that shouldn't be played. So there is a decision point that says, is this the current turn in the game? And if so, go ahead and play it. If not, assume you're cheating and let the end user know. But in the case where it is a bona fide turn, where the magic happens, if you will, is in this screen in particular. So we've got a mix of standard screen flow screen components from Flow, and then we also have some Lightning Web components in here, and these are all reactive components in the sense that they can accept data, send it back. Some of them send it back to Flow, not all of them, and then can also crosstalk by way of exposing properties between them. What we've got here, a couple of just display text. We're going to show the top card, i.e. the top of the discard pile that the player's playing against. We've got a component called Uno card that renders that for us. And we can pass that Uno card, basically an object or a record, from one of our queries up above. And that's one thing that I think is really awesome. Not just one thing. That's one of the things that I think is really awesome about LWCs and integrating them with Flow is you can pass full bona fide objects and even collections in and out of your LWCs. So I can, in effect, take advantage of Flow to build my queries for me. Now, I can't build nested queries or queries with that traverse relationships. But I think that's okay. I think that where it's at right now, the fact that I can query out some data, send it to a LWC, that LWC's job is now just rendering, and maybe the logic is all client-side interactions, but my LWC doesn't actually have to talk to anything. I might need it to talk to something, and we'll see an example of that, but I don't necessarily need to. I can use the flow to pass everything down into the LWCs. Kind of cool, right? I don't need an Apex controller. I don't need a wrapper. I can like literally use the Flow not only to get the data, but it's actually like it's configuration now, right? So I can if I want to, I can pick the fields that need to come back, etc. I think that's really handy. So long story short, that's what Uno card is. We can pass it a game card, which is the object that represents a card out of a standard Uno deck in the context of a game. So we can pass it to our Uno card, and it will show us what that card looks like. We also have an Uno hand, so that's another LWC. Because you can't loop over data in a screen in a flow screen in a screen flow screen, a data table you could kind of do it, but there isn't something like a repeater, right, that we get in like Experience Cloud or the Builder or something like that. So we need, for now, until that functionality comes available, and I don't know if it's going to in Flow or not, we need some way to wrap those cards that represent your hand. So we have another LWC called Uno Hand. Uno Hand it doesn't render anything, but it repeats more Uno cards. So we're reusing this Uno card component here within Uno Hand, and we'll see what that looks like, but it essentially loops over the cards in a player's hand. Again, we loaded through Flow the player's hand. So we've got a query to go and get that, and then I can actually pass the whole collection into the hand. Super cool. Like I said, don't have to do that work in my LWC. I let the Flow do all that work and then hand it down. So we'll see what Uno Hand looks like rendering Uno cards in a second. This selected game card ID, this was just a test field, basically. It just shows that the reactivity of a change in the Uno hand, essentially clicking an Uno card that it's rendering in its loop, will pass back a value, and then it's exposed. We're passing game card and card. We've got two objects, so won't get into it too much. But we're passing bona fide records around, not just fields, not just text, not just Boolean, entire objects. Entire records of certain object types. Finally, we've got our own footer. So we overrode the standard footer of the Flow with a custom LWC. The reason for that is when you're playing an Uno game, you don't always have a card to play, right? So, and you also have the option of not playing a card. You can draw a card, put it in your hand, and do nothing with it if that's your strategy or what have you. So rather than just use like the finish button or the next button in a screen flow, we wanted to have the option to continue, but maybe continue with no card played and continue with a specific card played. And we'll see what that looks like, partly to use as an experiment to show that we can have multiple LWCs reacting to changes in their properties through the Flow and have those changes occur, or changes move from one object to another. From one component to another. So there's the talk. Let's see what this looks like, and then we'll take a look at the LWCs below or the LWCs that are driving this, so that we can understand a little bit more. Okay, so I'm gonna cancel this. One thing I do need to find is we need a turn. So our play turn screen flow currently takes the Salesforce ID of a turn in a game. That will probably change once we figure out, hey, how are people going to interact with this? Are they going to go to the game record? Are they going to have a dashboard on their homepage? Also, it's Uno and probably not ever going to be used, by real people. But, trying to think through, like, how's a user going to get to their turn or know that they have a turn to play? So let's debug this. And I'm going to pass a turn ID here. I'm pretty sure this turn, yep, there we go. This turn is a turn that should be played. So what's happening here? Well, in our top card section, we have that Uno card LWC rendering the top card. So that's a game card record for us. And then we have our hand. So I've got 8 cards in my hand of various types. We've done a little bit of styling to show that red 3 actually is red and has a number 3 on it. We've got some other options here. So this is also within the hand. Remember, we have a Uno hand LWC. That's really a wrapper for one or more Uno cards, passing that data in, rendering them accordingly. So this red 2 and this red 3 are the same Lightning Web component. Get a little reuse out of it. Now you'll notice when I click on these, click on yellow 4, green 6, green 4, draw 4. What's happening is when I click, two things are happening. Subtly, it's difficult to see, but the selected game card ID is indeed changing. E, Z, the Salesforce IDs look very similar, so it's hard to tell the difference, but it is indeed changing. And more interestingly, I would say, is the color of the bottom right button in our, this is our custom footer navigation. We've overtaken what comes standard. That's also responding or reacting to that click and making itself basically look the same color and have text that explains, hey, what did I just click on? Whether we go with that or not when this is all said and done, I don't know. But the point is, I've got one LWC passing properties back up to the flow, and then the flow is passing those back down to another LWC. How's that all happening? Let's take a quick look. First, let's talk about the properties that are in play here. If I look at the Uno hand, I'm passing in the player's hand, the game card records. I have two other properties here. One is selected card and one is selected game card. Short story, we have a game card that represents red 5 in a game, and then we have a card which is just the Uno deck. We don't want to, we want to have a dictionary of cards, and then instances of those cards become game cards. But we're passing them both in and out because the game card tells us who has the card in a game, but the card itself tells us what color it is, what number it is, what's its value, what action to take, etc. So it's just there's relationships in there, so we don't have to create 108 cards every time we start a game. We just have one set of cards and then we create instances of it. So that's selected card and selected game card. That's why we're passing them around, because one represents in the game, one represents just the information about the card. Okay, we're not passing those in, but we're getting those back. We'll see how that happens in a second. The selected game card ID is waiting for essentially the selected game card property of Uno hand to come back, and then it will render the ID of that. So that's just very simple output there. What's more interesting is the footer. The footer is now essentially listening for changes to two more properties. They're the exact same properties on the footer as they are on the hand. The only difference is we're not setting them in the hand, but we are setting them in the footer so we can pass them down. But the footer is basically listening for, hey, when the value of Uno hand selected card and when the value of Uno hand's selected game card change, the footer knows what to do. It takes them and renders and changes the color, etc. So in essence, when I click on red 3, a property change is going from Uno hand up to the flow, and the flow is sending it immediately back down through another property to the to the footer. So, and it's instantaneous, right? There's no delay here. This isn't a platform event or anything like that. That's that's listening for it. It's all event driven through the flow actions or flow events. Sorry, to pass those up and down. So that's kind of neat, right? We can say, hey, I've got a property over here, and when it changes, another component can listen for it or not, right? It makes it flexible. I've got an example in this case where I've got two different components listening for a change from another component. One of them is a standard flow component, and the other one is another LWC. Pretty neat, right? You can have cross communication between your components in a single page. Now let's look at the code. Let's look at our LWCs a little bit deeper. The key magic glue of all of this is in the meta files of our components, as is usually everything that tells an LWC how it's allowed to work. So in this case, our Uno hand is that's the umbrella. That's the one that shows all the cards. We'll look at that in a second. It's targeted to basically be a lightning flow screen component, so that allows it to show up in the left sidebar when we're building. We see them down here on the left. The target configuration, these are the properties, right, that can come in and out. And I indicate that the target is the flow screen because that's just what you have to do. Now, the properties here game cards, selected game card, we see those appear over here, right? So, oops, clicking the wrong one. So here's player's hand, selected card, selected game card. Those are listed here as well. We have a label, we have a type. This took me a minute to understand, but as soon as I understood that we can pass not only objects or S object types, we can pass collections just by the syntax of the array. I had to kind of, the syntax wasn't super clear to me at first, but I found some examples and I was like, all right, awesome. We can, at first I thought, well, maybe we just have to, we can only pass strings, only pass numbers, only pass Booleans. That would be kind of tedious, but no, you can pass entire, object type records in and out, which super cool, right? How do you tie all this together? You don't just create these properties and then poof, magic happens. You have to basically implement these in your in the JavaScript code of your component. So I have those as API decorated getters and setters. I honestly don't know if you need getters and setters or if it will just happily do it on its own. I guess we could go back and I'll try that after this video. But incoming game cards, I didn't make a getter or a setter for, and it seems to be fine. But the outgoing values, the selected game card, the selected and the selected card, I want those to go out of my hand, tell the flow so that I can distribute it, to other components. So that's pretty simple. And then the other piece that is that's at play here is this handler that we have some parent-child LWC communication happening here. So as we'll see in a second, hand is a collection of cards. When I click on a card, it notifies its parent hand and then calls this handler to, again, do the magic of passing these properties back up to the flow. And to do that, I use this flow attribute change event, which we have, kind of subscribed to up here in our Uno hand, and pass those back up. So it feels a little bit confusing. I get it, but it's sort of like, I thought maybe, if I just could change the value of my getters and setters, that the metadata would say, oh, you've got a property in your LWC called game card or selected game card. I will take care of that for you. But you actually have to call this, create a new instance of this event and dispatch it with the name of your property and the value that you want to set it as. Now, the bonus here is when you call it like this, it is gonna pass it up to the flow, but it's also gonna set the value here. It's gonna call this setter. So if I were to put a breakpoint here, step over it, and put a breakpoint here in the setter, it would indeed step in and set that value. So it's not like an either or thing. It's taking care of the property setting in your LWC and then passing it up to the flow. So that's cool. It again took a minute to kind of figure out how to thread the needle through all of that, but once it's working, it's working. It feels like there's like one extra step in this change event call. So that's our hand. Let's look at the HTML to explain like what's going on here. So the game cards, again, that's what we're passing in. So here's our get player hand game cards, queried from the flow, passed into the LWC. LWC doesn't have to do any work, just receives that. If we have it, we make a simple grid, loop over those game cards. And for each game card, I'm going to create a Uno card, which is our second object in play here. So we end up with a grid of Uno cards. Passing that handler on each of these, and I've created my own select event here, and when we call select or selected, it fires the event, and we pass some details about the card back up to the hand, and the hand does its flow stuff that we just looked at. So let's take a look at the card. Now there is we do have, for that special case of the top card, basically top of the discard pile that we have at the top of our flow, our screen here, we have also exposed a property to the flow and allowed this individual component to be targeted by the flow screen as well. So a game card can be passed in. That's our top card, again passing in an object, which conveniently is also what we pass from Uno hand into our cards if we're doing our grid. So we're getting reuse in both directions. In one case, the flow is passing that property, and in the other case, the Uno hand is passing a value for that property. So, but we're not passing anything back from, we're not passing anything back from the card to the flow, mostly because this top is just read only. There's nothing to do here. What we are passing back is from the card to the hand when I click. Now this is standard event, custom event communication between a parent and a child component. Let's take a look at that just to, kind of connect all the dots here. Do I have my card? Here we go, Uno card. Let's move that a little closer to the other one. There we go. So Uno card, and then we'll look at the HTML here as well. So Uno card, we have a property for game card, so we can receive that value either from the flow or from the LWC, the Uno hand LWC. We've just got some properties in here to gather and render, so we don't have a bunch of logic in our HTML. Something that is happening here. Now, I've talked about everything about how it's so cool that, we can just pass stuff from the flow and, not have to worry about making our LWCs do queries and stuff like that. That is true. However, in this case, like I said, the data model is I've got a game card. That's like a junction between the game and the card. Game card sits in the middle. But I need info about the card. And right now, I can't do relationship queries or queries with related fields in Flow and pass them in here. I just get sort of the flat, whatever fields are on the directly on the object, that's what you're going to get back. So I'm not going to be able to get game card dot something, right? Which would be our, in relationship speak, how those would work. So one option would be add formula fields to the game card, which is probably what we'll ultimately do. But I had a curiosity here and it just sort of, I don't usually do this. I want to have components be as sort of anemic as possible in how they're communicating back and forth to Salesforce. But in this case, I said, what happens if we wire up a get record call on each of these game cards when they're created? Again, probably not best practice, inefficient because I'm making, I'm sort of shotgunning a bunch of calls in. Apex and LWC do the whole boxcar thing, I think, still, but there could be a performance hit there. Nonetheless, that's what it's doing. I pass in a game card, and it goes and gets the card that it's related to, so that we have that information as well, and then we can pass it back also if we want, which is what we're doing. But that's it for the card component. If we look at the HTML, not much here. It's literally a lightning card. There's some CSS mojo that's happening to I'm using what we call design tokens or style hooks. Sorry, that's not it. This is the card. So I've created a couple of variables for this purpose, and then I've defaulted the background color and the text color of the card itself, and we do a little property setting with the CSS down here with this update CSS call so that you can change the color. Essentially, we have a color field on the card, and it's literally like old school HTML, red, green, yellow, blue, nothing hex, but it probably should be hexadecimal just so we could add some, different color options besides just like a 8-color palette. But anyway, so that's what update CSS is doing in here. The salient bits here are this handle click function, right? So when I click on a card, which is what I'm doing here. So when I do that, what happens? I click, I create an event. It's that selected event, which is what we're passing from the hand into each card and telling it what to do when that is fired. What I'm passing in here is both my game card data record and my card record, because we need them both for the footer. Passing these up to the hand, which receives them here, and we're using, we just created two properties of our own on the detail object, reading those back out, game card and card. And then the rest takes care of itself because the flow has been, the LWCs have been configured to talk with the flow. The flow knows that those are coming in. And when I click from here, it goes down to our footer. And if we take a look at our footer, here's the meta file for the footer. Again, flow screen enabled 3 properties here. Looks very much like the Uno hand. We've got selected game card and selected card. We're passing those in this time. So they're inputs, essentially. They're outputs from the hand. They're inputs to the footer. I think there's a way to actually indicate that. I just didn't, yeah. I think there's a property that you can set, or an attribute you can set on these tags that will do that. And then something that's coming out is this selected action, right? So we need this to be able to tell the flow, what did we click, essentially, and what action should we take after we click. So let's look at the input side of this first. When the footer receives these values, again, we've got our getters and setters for our selected card, selected game card, etc. So those are incoming. And when they come in, we get all of our properties here and we can render as we want to. It looks a lot like, there's a lot of logic here for the styling that looks like the Uno card. What we are doing from an output perspective is when the user clicks on one of those buttons at the bottom, down here, we're going to go to the next step. So how do we do that? We use another flow support action called this flow navigation next event. There's a flow navigation next, flow navigation back, flow navigation finish, flow navigation pause. I think those are all of them. And there's a way to determine, are those available to you in the context of your LWC as it's executing. So if you want to say go next, but there's no way to go next because you're on the last step of your flow, you can check. I think it's available actions. Yeah, it's this here. You kind of get this for free when you use when you enable flow support and use any of these events. So you can check this. I forget what the data structure looks like, but you can check it to say, like, is there a next value? And if so, okay, I can call next because it's present as an option. But when we click one of these buttons, we have a few properties on those buttons. We have an on-click on both of them. They fire the same thing. We're passing in a value. So I'm passing in discard when I click on the in this case the draw 4 button, and I'm passing a done value if I don't play a card. Those are used elsewhere in our data model, so we're just using those values so that they can end the turn essentially. But in order to do that, we again need some way to handling the click, and then I need to pass both an attribute change of selected action, again done or drawn, done or discarded, and then call the next event, because I want this to move to the next step in either case so that I can make decisions in the next step with the values with that selected action that was here. So let's take a look at that in the flow. I'll get out of this step. I come down here to button outcome, and I can see that I have access to the selected action property of my Uno turn footer, and whatever I've set that as, either discard or done, I can use that in my next step decision to tell my flow what to do when I click that button, right? So by default, next, finish, pause, back, flow just knows what to do with them. It goes to the next screen and executes the flow logic in between them. In our case, we're overriding that, so we need to sort of do the same thing, but we need this decision to say, well, what did you click? So if I click discard, and this has not been tested whatsoever, but I click discard, I want to update some fields on this turn to essentially indicate that it's done and what was discarded and what needs to be the new top card in the deck, etc. And then in typical flow form, we finish up, do some record updates, some cleanup. We have a subflow that actually initiates a new turn. Definitely won't go into that right now. And then we'll have a screen that says, hey, you're done. So in and amongst all of that, 3 examples of LWCs and flows taking input and returning output parameters, some reactivity between 2 LWCs on a page by way of just property passing, right? So in essence, Uno turn footer, the properties of selected card and game card are listening for Uno hand to have those values, and as soon as it does, it will take them and run with them. So pretty cool stuff. I guess this is all still in beta. There is a magic checkbox you have to click in, I forget, user management or process automation settings or something like that to enable the beta in your org. To do this, I actually was scratching my head for 20 minutes wondering why my stuff wasn't working, and lo and behold, in my scratch org, that box wasn't checked. So fix that, and now this is working. But technically, beta seems to be working pretty well from what I can see, and I felt like the whole purpose of this exercise of building Uno, not the whole purpose, but one side effect is getting to mess around with some of these new features and having kind of green space to do that. So hopefully this example is useful. The code is actually up on GitHub. Let's see if I can find it. So if I go to ycdtosf.com/uno. Nope, just kidding. Well, let's just open it in Nope, that's somebody else's code that's probably way better than mine. Let's look at my repositories here. Here we go. So Uno is up here. All the source code. That's what we were going to work on next week. I ended up working on it just now. And I think I need to probably push an update out, which I will do so right after this video so that you can have the latest. In fact, let's just do that right now. And let's say this was season 2, episode 16, post clip. And we got to stage all that. There we go, and push. And just save just in case. Hopefully I didn't just break something, but now the latest should be out here. Yep, and there we go. So there's all the latest code. You're welcome to take a look around. Tell me what you think. And thought maybe this was a not so shorter clip, 30 minutes later. But there you have it. There's a kind of a brief walkthrough of a specific topic that we looked at yesterday on You Can't Do That on Salesforce. And well, if you're watching this, you're probably already seeing it on YouTube. But thanks for watching. And we'll do a longer show next week. Tune in, 2 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. I post it every Tuesday morning on LinkedIn. Love to have you there. If you learned something about Salesforce, awesome. If not, you can hear my really bad jokes and stare at my beard. I'm Tom. You Can't Do That on Salesforce. We'll see you later.